Thanks so much. You know ETHWarsaw. I've seen all of you at our meetups. I'm very happy that you're here. But I want to tell you something about our plans going forward. So when doing ETHWarsaw, we've noticed that while the conference is great, the meetups are great, we only get to see each other once a year, maybe once every 2 or 3 months, depending on the frequency of the meetups. The meetups have a fixed structure. We have a presentation, then we network a little bit, but that's all. Some of you tend to get together to work from coffee shops, restaurants, whatever, or some different co-working spaces. And we wanted to provide you a place where you can do this in a space where it's only focused on blockchain. And this is something that we want to do. So besides hosting the conference, the hackathon, besides the meetups, we also want to get into something a bit more tangible here. So I actually want to set up the space in here. The space is going to be called Collective Free. It's a slight hint that it's going to be more than just blockchain. We want to add different technologies to the mix. We want to make sure that all of the new tech companies have a place to work from here. This is done in partnership with Ramp. And if you can see the space here, part of that will be allocated to ETHWarsaw co-working space. You will have your own allocated desk. You will have your monitors. But besides that, we're also going to be hosting different sorts of meetups. We're going to be hosting boot camps. There's going to be a social part to the whole component. There's going to be a technical part to this. If you want to build your team, you can start from here. If you want to recruit people to your company, you can use us as a broadcast to your community. So basically, we want to help get those projects started. Besides just the co-working space, we want to get into something like an acceleration. We're not going to take 15% cut of your equity, so don't fear that. But we want to help you, connect you to the right people. We want to help you build connections. We want to help you hire your early team members. But we also want to be a part of what you're building. We want to be exposed to that. We want to know what's happening in the space, and we want to become this one central hub for everything that's happening in crypto in not just Warsaw, but also but just in Poland. If you want to check out more or sign up, you can go to the QR code. We're going to be starting in July. We already have signups open, and I would love to see you here. I'm going to be working here. My dog's going to be working here as well. Pets are welcome. We're hoping to host many more meetups and different events here. If you want to host your own meetup, if you want to set your company here, let me know. We'd love to help you get that done. And this is everything that I wanted to set. I'm running out of breath because I was really trying to make it fast. And right now we're going to move to the fireside chat with Vitalik. So let's do a warm applause for Vitalik here. And Przemek's gonna be running the fireside. Przemek is a CEO of Ramp and started building product and strategy there. And I'm really out of breath right now. So I'm gonna hand this over to you. First to you.
Thank you. Here you go. Thank you. So, it's so good to see everyone, all those faces. Hello, Vitalik. It's very nice to see you here in Warsaw at our place. It's very special for me, and I'm grateful that for this opportunity. Like the Ethereum is a long-term project. You started building this more than 10 years ago. And naturally, it's like a ton of story behind it. And I still remember the days of the DAO hack. It killed my first crypto project back then, and before it even started. And when you look back at all those years, there are many decisions that you made back then, but one of those, the most meaningful, was to actually start the foundation, and foundation funded by the initial funds from the ICO, and I'm curious how you view the impact of the foundation over all those years, and what's the material impact of having the foundation, especially compared to Bitcoin, where there is no foundation, and from one side, someone could say that they're doing great as well.
Yeah, I think for a new project like Ethereum, of course, if there wasn't a source of funding for developers, I just don't think the project would have been able to get off the ground at all, right? The amount of software that we had to write to just get Ethereum out there at the level of quality that it had is like very significant, right? And like if we had theoretically a much smaller team and it was only volunteers, like probably it would have taken longer, it would have been worse quality, it would have broken more, it would have had more problems. I personally would not have been optimistic about trying to start Ethereum in like that kind of like pure volunteer way, right? And I mean, even Bitcoin itself, right? I think it benefited a lot from having these early holders that were just like motivated to start all kinds of businesses, a lot of which funded Bitcoin development early on. So I think at the beginning the problem was just like Ethereum existing at all. And in one of the choices that I remember we had was making a foundation versus making a company. And near the beginning, I made the choice that it needs to be a foundation, because I thought that like up for a project like Ethereum, if it was launched by a for-profit company that had shareholders, like this is something that people would just not be willing to accept, and the project would just not be able to succeed. So I'm very glad that I did that. I think at some point later, like Ethereum definitely moves to the point where, like, theoretically, if the foundation did not exist, like development could have continued, right? And I mean Bitcoin as well, right? And I think at some point the other concern that becomes like a bigger problem as the funding problem becomes a little bit smaller is the concern of the incentives of who is doing the development, and like whether or not the protocol gets captured, right? Because in Bitcoin, there have been a lot of controversies, like Blockstream is paying a lot of the developers. What does Blockstream want? I mean, like, is the whole small block thing like done by them because they want L2s? And like people make like arguments about all kinds of different companies, right? And having some kind of counterbalance to the commercial pressure is something that is, I think continues to be really valuable for Ethereum. And I mean, I think what's interesting about this year and like especially these last few months, right, is like the rest of the ecosystem has grown to the point where the foundation isn't like by far the biggest player, right? It's one of the players, and so that means that actually creates more opportunity for the foundation to be kind of more clear about it focusing on and expressing kind of particular perspectives, and even the perspectives that like other kinds of actors don't have the incentive to build on their own.
Yeah, so exactly. So I think the main, like the question that I would be interested to hear about is what do you feel? What do you view the role of the foundation coming forward in this new ecosystem where it's not the biggest player, but it's actually the small cog in the machine?
Yeah, I think the role of the foundation needs to be to do those things that are core to the mission that Ethereum has had since the beginning, but which where there isn't an incentive for profit-making actors to just build it on their own. I could give a few examples, right? So one of them is just preserving the decentralization of the protocol, right? So things like open source, open standards, also what I call the walk-away test, which is basically that like your ability to do things on Ethereum should not depend on some company, where if the company disappears, like suddenly you lose all your coins or you can't do anything or you have a security issue. And projects that are built by companies like often just do not really think about these things in the same way, right? And like there are incentives for like pursuing vendor lock-in, and like creating open versions of things, or at least like helping to coordinate that and encourage that to exist as one of its roles. We've also been recently starting to focus on privacy much more, and privacy is also, it's like one of those things which is, I mean, often difficult to kind of like market as a product, right? I mean, there have been successes, like Signal has been very successful, and I think you know, we can all learn from the successes that Signal has had, right? But like actually building out some of that core infrastructure to make it easier to interact with Ethereum privately, and it's one of those things that we're starting to really look into. So protecting the protocol from like centralized capture, you know, ensuring its decentralization, ensuring privacy, ensuring censorship resistance, in doing the kinds of L1 protocol work that like benefit the whole ecosystem without really like concentrating the benefit on one central actor, like a lot of those kinds of things.
Do you think like regulatory lobbying and legal actions are the part of it, of the story?
I mean, this is one of those areas where I think you know, we have to be careful, right? Because like when you interact with a politician, like the politician is willing to come and have that interaction because they also think that they're getting something from you. And so you have to be careful. I mean, like which like what kinds of people are you empowering in that way, right? So I think you know, there's always that you know, the risk that if you get close to the wrong kinds of people and in the wrong ways, you know, politics can be a very chaotic thing, and you know, like a choice that you thought was kind of reasonable and mild, like suddenly turns out to have like much more significant consequences. But at the same time, like there definitely is, I think, an important perspective in like crypto politics and regulation that where like there's value in organizations like the EF supporting, right? Because I mean, obviously, you know, our interest is not the same as the interest of like anti-crypto people who think crypto is bad and crypto should be banned, but also our interest is not exactly the same as like the interest of centralized exchanges, for example, right? And so, I mean, the way that like we as a foundation have been taking that balance so far is like we have had some conversations with governments around the world, usually on a fairly informal basis, but the bulk of our involvement is supporting local organizations around the world that are like focused on a particular region and have kind of missions and like approaches that generally align with kind of what the EF is doing.
Speaking about local communities and local organizations, you invest a lot also into making sure that they exist, and they were always very passionate. So I'm curious what's your view on the why they're so passionate, but also how you view their role in the ecosystem overall.
Yeah, in a few answers, right? So first of all, it's you know, having developers is good. Having more users is good. Having more people involved in just every single part of Ethereum, also the non-technical parts, is good. And like people are everywhere, right? And one of the advantages of I think crypto is that compared to like any other industry, like it really discriminates much less based on your location, right? And so like if you think of something like AI, it becomes just like 10 times easier to build something and get a lot of users and make a lot of money and find partners if you're based in San Francisco, right? But here, like in crypto, I don't think there is anything like that effect to anything nearly the same extent, right? And so people are everywhere, and I think we want to support people who wants to be part of Ethereum wherever they are. Another thing is that actually, like I personally view geographic decentralization as being part of capture resistance, right? So you know, there's like there definitely have been a lot of other like blockchains in all of history that have been you know, like saying, you know, like, oh, you know, we are the blockchain of Korea, we are the blockchain of China. I mean, recently even like people saying like we are, you know, like the blockchain of America. And like if you're overly concentrated on one region to that extent, then like obviously it becomes harder to be censorship resistant. It becomes harder to try to claim that your platform is fair between people, like in that place and outside of it. And having like strong communities around the world, both that are able to be part of the social layer and even that are able to like run nodes and like participate in proof of stake, like that's all I think a very important aspect of that too.
Yep, that makes sense. So going back to the decisions and looking over time. In crypto, when we look back, many of those initial ideas, narratives look quite naive from time perspective. At some point, we strongly believed that and still many people do, that the code is law and like we should just fully accept what smart contracts are doing and how this influences the world, that that institutional adoption is gonna come soon, like tomorrow, and it's gonna change everything. And from the time perspective, we see that some of those decisions or ideas were maybe a bit naive, or but also we had others that were very much visionary and long term. How when you look at the current ecosystem and the current market, what do you think that the current ideas, narratives are gonna be viewed in the same way in the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we're like on the tail end of like basically the meme coin era, right? And in 2024 we saw lots of people making meme coins. We saw lots of animal coins. We saw political coins. Like we saw all kinds of different meme coins. And I mean, I definitely think, like I'm not an opponent of all meme coins. Like especially when Doge came out at the beginning. Like I thought Doge was great. I bought some. But like what was happening is that it's kind of the equivalent of like it's like at the beginning they were selling strawberries and then at the end they were selling heroin, right? It's you go toward things that are kind of more and more like very short-term oriented, and that are kind of like more about this kind of very momentary buzz instead of like any kind of long-term meaning. I mean, like those things are unhealthy, right? Like, and Pump.fun, I think like over 99% of participants lost money, right? And then like you had these narratives that basically said like, oh, like those like people are elitist and like they don't understand that like the common people need things like meme coins because we're desperate to make money, and then actually like most people who participate lose money, right? And so like I'm actually I'm happy that like it feels like that's kind of subsided now, but then there's the question of like what is the thing that comes next. And to me the thing that comes next is and a lot of it is just like applications that are actually useful and that actually just provide a lot of value to people in like very boring ways, right? So a simple one is that we've actually seen like DeFi is very mature at this point, right? And like with DeFi you can go get US dollars and euros and like other currencies and like on Aave get interest rates of like 3 to 4%, right? Now, from a lot of people's point of view, like, what's the point of this, right? Because you can get the same interest rates in a bank account, right? But, like, one, there's lots of ways the bank accounts are not convenient, especially if you're trying to make more international transactions. And two, there's big parts of the world that don't have access to bank accounts. A lot of people don't have access to traditional finance, and a lot of people, like there's a very big middle that does have access, but they have access to things that don't pay them interest, right? And like crypto actually does, right? So this is one of those things that like I actually think the space is like very uniquely suited to provide at the moment. So a lot of it I think is in like that, and then I also think that the more experimental and interesting end of crypto is something that needs to continue. And the way that I'm seeing the more experimental and interesting end of crypto is, I mean, one, like a big part of it is privacy, right? And think like ZK technology is mature enough that like we can really incorporate it into applications by default now, both from the perspective of UX and from a perspective of like security and trust. And so, like privacy is an area where crypto in general has been like actually far behind, right? It's like actually kind of funny, right? Because the like spiritual grandfather of Bitcoin, right, is eCash from David Chaum, and eCash was actually it was centralized, but it was private, right? And then we flipped and we went to Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin is decentralized, but it's not private, right? And now we have ZK Snarks, and then with ZK Snarks, like we actually have both, right? And now, if you look out into like wider technology, and then we see, like the rise of surveillance cameras. We see the rise of like AI-based data analysis. We also see, just like people having more interactions with AIs, and those AIs sitting in servers that are somewhere in, Silicon Valley or maybe Beijing or somewhere else, right? And like I think privacy is a topic that people will become more and more concerned about. So there's a lot of just really interesting things in the crypto space happening there. Also, like I think that there's value in like being more experimental with DAOs, right? Because this is one of these like very idealistic early ideas, but then people like I think converged too early on a very boring version of them, where like you just have coins and you vote. And like actually, if you just have coins and you vote, there's like 10 reasons it doesn't work very well, right? And so like I actually think reopening that idea, and then actually, like privacy is important in governance too, right? Like, there's a reason why votes in a regular democracy are private, and if you make like everything in a DAO public, it just turns into a social game. And I think experimenting with like the right way to involve AI is also going to be important. So, I don't know, a lot of interesting things like at the this experimental end of crypto, and I think like both of these ends are important.
Yeah. So which of those are gonna be, when we look from the future, we look back, which one of those are going to be naive?
Well, this is the challenge, right? We don't know yet. Yeah, I think, generally, right, the ideas that get called, well, it actually depends, right? Because, if you look at, for example, like crypto consumer payments, right? Like one of the big dreams of the early days was like crypto would actually just like replace things like credit cards, right? I don't know if anyone back in the early days visited Kreuzberg in Berlin. There was this one guy who convinced like more than 10 restaurants and stores in like one very small part of Berlin to just all accept Bitcoin, and it turned into this sort of exciting like small community. But then that ended up dying out. I think. I think two reasons, right? One is transaction fees on Bitcoin went up, and then the other is that. I think actually crypto helped, but like the fees on traditional finance got better, right? Because 15 years ago, like PayPal charged 3%, and then like 6% for anything international. Like it was terrible, right? And then now there's like SEPA, and then in the US like Venmo, and then, like just a lot of different things, right? And so traditional finance is like somewhat improved in some places, but. Yeah, so today, like consumer payments on crypto kind of feels naive in the same way, but at the same time, like there are places around the world where the like Argentina is one, a lot of Nigeria, places like Turkey, a lot in Southeast Asia, where like crypto actually just does get used quite a bit. So I think like often. It's like we don't know what's naive and what's not, and the successes appear in the most unexpected places.
I'm laughing because you are kind of like, so we are doing exactly this. We're working with in the payment itself. So you kind of roasted our project on stage, which is funny in itself. But like the going back to the exactly to the payments and the stable coins, because the stable coins are like the new big thing on in the block. And I have actually the question about the when you look at stable coins, like right now, why there are so like where there's people talking about them. Like I think one of those is that they become regulated in Europe, and this is also coming to other countries. But the question is like, if the future of crypto is mostly to be just a transactional layer for the payments in stablecoins that are regulated, we have the gateways that are also regulated. So you have the ramp itself, like you have the centralized exchanges as well. So, and we have to, as because we are forced by regulators to track the transaction and screen the users. So if we have this world where we have the regulated ecosystem, regulated payment, regulated stablecoins via regulated gateways, did we won or lost?
Yeah, it depends, right? And I think there's the regulatory dimension to this, and then there's also the monetary policy dimension to this, right? Where if you listen to crypto lobbying in the U.S., they often argue that crypto is good because it basically makes it easier to for the U.S. dollar to spread across the world, and so crypto is good for American dollar dominance. And if you compare this to the vision of Bitcoin, it's of course a very pretty significantly different type of thing, right? And so it's this is already one of these kind of surprises, right? But the way that I think about this is that it's not just about the kinds of applications and the kinds of workflows that people are using today. It's about what barriers become reduced and what things become what kinds of switching become easier, right? Because if you imagine someone makes a stable coin and then payments start happening with stable coins and it's an ERC20, but then at some point they say hey, we're going to start massively blacklisting a lot of people, right? Then what actually happens is that the consumers and the merchants, they now have access to wallets on Ethereum that can handle the ERC20 standard, and so it actually becomes very easy for them to collectively switch over to anything else, right? If USDT goes crazy or USDC goes crazy, they can switch to USDT. They can switch to potentially all kinds of other different things, right? And then. And so I think that's true both on this monetary level of different currencies and assets, and so I think it's good to have different types of assets be available on chain, right? So it's good to support stablecoins based on euros, stablecoins based on different kinds of local national currencies, and ways to make tools to make it easier to work with. Basically, I think if someone accepts payment in ERC20, you should be able to pay in any other ERC20, and the exchange process should feel automatic, right? But then for any of these things, right? Once things are happening on Ethereum L1, it does actually become harder for people, the people and the companies to abuse users in a lot of different ways, right? Because if you look at even something like social media, sometimes people can get shadow banned and you don't even know whether someone got shadow banned, right? And then on the blockchain, if there's a blacklist, the blacklist is on chain, right? And you can publicly challenge it. You can say, hey, what happens? Why did they do this to me, right? So it's the transparency is greater, and then the transparency of the rules is greater, the people's ability to switch to better things is greater. So I think it's really important for us to make sure that all of the underlying standards that we're using are as open as possible. But if we have that, then I think many kinds of adoption are very positive.
Yeah. So you mentioned privacy and decentralization as one of those concepts that are important for also for the payments and for the what is gonna be looked after in the future. But when we look at from the perspective of the user or regulator, the needs are sometimes different. So, for example, they require good UX and lack of transparent transaction in the sense that someone else can screen them and the money flows. On the other hand, I'm not saying that you're supporting this, but you supported Roman Storm lawsuit and financially to defend him. He's the Tornado Cash funder. So I'm curious about your views in general about how to balance those two forces, like the one of the for the need of privacy, and other from the actual need of transparency and transaction being screened, and like as you mentioned earlier, what you want from the foundation to do is to enable those programmed interactions without any interference from the third party. So.
Yeah, and so I think with privacy protocols, that's interesting, right? Because like there's this like newer wave of them, like things like privacy pools, things like a Railgun, where they like have these mechanisms that basically like let you as a user prove that. Like if like some bad actor made a deposit, then like basically every other user can prove that they're not one of the bad actors, right? And I mean, this to me is actually one of the big advantages of programmability, right? Which is that it's not just about kind of 0 or 1. Like basically, either you're completely anonymous or like everything is revealed. Like you have the ability to reveal like statements about yourself or statements about your assets or transactions in a very fine-grained way, and like often that gives us the ability to solve a lot of problems in a way that gives us the best of both worlds in a way that was not even possible to people 15 years ago, right? And so I think like things like privacy pools and Relay are good examples of that. I mean, things like ZK Passport are also good examples of that. Like you can build applications where like you solve the anti-Sybil problem. You prevent like bad actors from making like many thousands of accounts very easily. And you can even like target particular countries, but do this at a way that like within those boundaries still completely preserves privacy. So I think programmability is a really powerful thing that opens a lot of possibilities there that did not exist before.
Yep. Great. So going away from the tough topics, and I'm curious. Maybe this is tough, but in the other way. I'm curious, what's your view on the questions, like very broad one, how to change the world? So you worked on crypto and in Ethereum for the last 10, 13 years, and on one hand you changed the world itself, but also someone could say that a revolution that takes 15 years, it's not a revolution. So it's a hard job. So how to enable the change globally?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges, right, is that the world is a chaotic place, right? I think one of the really interesting cautionary tales for me is OpenAI, right? Because like if I remember the beginnings of OpenAI, it was this very idealistic project where the philosophy basically said, look, by default, it looks like AI is going to be dominated by all of these corporations and people like DeepMind, which is part of Google, and it's going to be very centralized. It's going to spy on people, and then let's make a free and open source alternative, right? And then that's where OpenAI started from. And then, of course, famously, and then also, they said, well, this is going to benefit humanity. This will be a non-profit project. And so then what happened after that is, step one, it stopped being a non-profit project, and it became a hybrid for-profit. Then step two, they gave up openness because they decided that's what they had to do for safety. And then step three is they gave up safety because they decided that's what they needed to scale faster. And then, step four is like they gave up on like basically like the board and like the nonprofit part, and kind of neutered it. I mean, not quite to zero, but like pretty close, right? And but then on the other hand, you could say, like, well, at least that whole process took 10 years, and at least like still because of those kind of like non-profit legal bits, like OpenAI is having trouble raising money, and so they're able to like only get like some like maybe 20 or 30 billion dollars instead of like 100, and maybe other companies have a chance to catch up, right? But it just shows how the world can be chaotic in a lot of ways, right? Like both the intentions of individuals. I mean, sometimes and like even actions in politics can be chaotic, right? And then you can say like, hey, like maybe like free speech is something we needs to move away from because like there's people that are saying things that are like false or hateful, and then it turns out that 4 years later the people who are in charge of deciding what is false and what is hateful turn out to be a completely different group of people from what you expected, and then maybe if you look back you think you had a negative impact, right? And so I think the world is full of like these kinds of complexities and contradictions in a lot of different directions, and so like you can't expect to have like you can only expect or how should I put it, it's like you don't want to overestimate your ability to steer, right? Like and so if we think about, or even like the internet itself is one of those examples, right? Where people are, a lot of the things that we talk about as being goals of crypto, they're things that people assumed that the internet would do automatically, right? Like the internet would automatically create a decentralized world. It would automatically create this like democratic global utopia where all of the bad governments would fall away. And of course, these things did not happen, and actually the internet ended up becoming super centralized, right? And so, like, the lessons that, like, I think I learned from that are that, like, this does not mean that we should be nihilistic, right? And we should say, like, okay, we have no idea what's going to happen, and then let's, like, just, like, focus on, like, pursuing profit, right? I think we should say, let's be, like, if you have a goal, then like you should you should aim for that goal. And like a big part of the reason why crypto was able to stay like decentralized and stay censorship resistant is just because like we actually tried hard to, and we said like these are the core principles that like we're not willing to give up on, right? And like these are principles that were repeated again and again, and the decentralized social structure itself also meant that like these like the chains have to coordinate around something, right? And like the idea of decentralization means that it's going to be harder for them to coordinate around one leader who suddenly says let's like do something completely opposite, right? And like the principle is the thing that they rally around. So I think there have been like some successes, right? So if you look back to like 2014 and you basically ask from the perspective of someone in 2014, like has the space at least improved the world from the perspective of the values of one of us in 2014, then I think the answer is like there are parts of it that have, and there are parts of it that definitely have kind of like completely gone off the rails, right? There are parts where like the pressure of incentives is very strong, and then basically at the beginning people said like, yeah, this is the people's revolution, we're in a replace the banking system, and then later on people are quietly saying like, oh, actually no, we're trying to improve the banking system, and then it turns out that you get very close to the banking system, you become friends with them, and then well actually it's like the banking system influences you more than you influence the banking system, right? It's and well, like not being corrupted is one of these like very challenging things, right? Like I get reminded like there's like people in Russia I know, right, who sometimes like say, yo, like we're going, like they decide to stay, and they decide to even stay in like places close to the regime, and they say like, oh, like I in this position, like maybe I will be better than the next guy, and like I can make things better, but then like actually the influence flows in the other direction, right? And like 3 years later, right? So it's like this is one of those things that I think I did not realize 10 years ago, right? Basically the like do not overestimate your ability to kind of not be taken over by whatever currents you put yourself in, right? And like you basically try to like and like I actually think this is where crypto is like a lot of the ideas were successful, right? Because it's not just about a person saying I will be the agent of change, I will be the agent of making the world great, and like you should trust me, right? Which is like realistically like as much as like people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk have done amazing things technologically, like that is their model, right? And a lot of the downsides of their approach come from that being their model, right? And like crypto actually does, like there's an aspect of it that tries to like actually set up the institutions and like actually set it up so that like your incentive continues to be aligned with doing the right thing. Yeah, so probably like if I had to like summarize, I guess like what we've learned over the last like 20 years to a tech founder. I mean, a big part of it I think is that you are not going to be immune to the pressures of the environment that you create, and like make sure you create a good one.
Nice
I don't
one.
know, that was a long answer.
No,
but
that was very good.
important.
Okay. Do you feel how are you dealing with the feeling of responsibility? Do you feel responsible for the goods and the bads that happen on Ethereum?
I mean, it's definitely something that I often think about. I mean, it's a lot of the time there's the crypto world is a world where all kinds of different crazy things happen, right? And I mean, like sometimes you hear about things like, oh no, there's like the $1.5 billion Bybit hack, and then if you think about this by the standards of like when we all started back in like 2013, right? Like a $1.5 billion hack would have been news that dominated like news media cycles for like a month, right? And it would have discredited an entire industry. But here now it's like the total craziness level of the world has just gone up by so much, right? And I mean, this is like, I mean, there's times when it's an exciting thing, but it's like also an incredibly worrying thing. And now, of course, a $1.5 billion hack just like happens regularly. I mean, all kinds of completely insane things happen regularly. And so, I mean, being mindful of like what kinds of things you're encouraging in an ecosystem is something that I think is super important, right? And like for example, like one thing I'm very proud of is how basically no one in Ethereum took Terra Luna seriously, right? Like when Terra Luna collapsed, like a lot of people had massive eggs on their faces, right? And but actually, basically no one in Ethereum, right? And I mean, we got criticized for this, right? We basically, people often call us, ivory tower elitists who, like do not understand, the common people. But the common people want 19% APR on the dollar, right? But of course, in reality, though, that particular project ended up giving a lot of common people a minus 100% APR on the dollar. And then, I mean, actually, FTX was kind of similar, right? I think. I remember a reason why I never was like took FTX like super seriously was I had some conversations with SBF, and I remember at one point I asked him like, hey, you should write up something that basically describes like what are your visions for crypto, right? Like what excites you about the space, and then he it took 2 months for him to like answer, and then eventually he gave that Twitter thread. And if you read the Twitter thread, like honestly, it just looks like like random like crappy like crypto conference boilerplate, right? It's like imagine someone attends a like blockchain mega summit, and then they like listen to 5 presentations by some sponsors, and then like ask GPT to summarize it, and like that's it, right? So the like I think it is important to like really have a feel for those kinds of things. I mean, and then if you asked me like where some of Ethereum's failures are. I mean, I think, like, so first of all, the algorithm of like rejecting everything obviously is wrong, right? And like even having a very high bar leads to failures in the other direction, which is like I do think that like the value of like just like very boring forms of DeFi was something that like I undervalued and like underestimated the extent to which the space actually had kind of stabilized and matured, especially after the earlier crazier era, right? So like these are the two sides, right? Where on the one hand, like if you talk, sometimes if you think about responsibility, like if you think about it from a kind of like don't make the New York Times upset kind of approach, then like the downside is that like basically the world passes you by, and like the events of the world get run by people who care about those kinds of things much less than you do, right? And so like things become even worse, right? So I think it's like it's okay to make some mistakes, right? And but at the same time, it's like also just important to remember like what are the principles that brought you into the space, and like be mindful of those principles, and like at the same time as you know, like observe the world and like the new situation that the world is bringing.
Thank you. Okay, the last one. When Devcon in Warsaw?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea. You guys have a great venue over there. It's you know, I guess you know, from Justin Timberlake to Justin Drake. Maybe, and then the year after you could have the other Drake. Yeah, what do I think? It's I personally, would love for that to happen. I mean, I think generally every time we do a DEF CON, you know, there's like a form that you can fill, like, and there's like to suggest new locations, right? And then last year, like a lot of community groups, you know, like fought really hard for, you know, like Thailand and Vietnam and a couple of other venues. No, you know, like make your voice heard, and like those forms do get read, and they get read by and argued over many times.
So maybe easier question. Which continent is next?
Yeah, good question. I mean, obviously for this year it's Buenos Aires, right? I mean, next year, I mean, I think different options are open. I mean, I've heard. You know, I mean, generally, yeah, you know, our algorithm is, of course, to, you know, like not do the same continent, like one year after the other, right? But I mean, there's been interest in like some kind of Central Asian type of location. I mean. Africa has been explored, though. I mean, one of the challenges there, of course, is like just venues, especially at the kind of large scale that DEF CON attracts. In a lot of ideas have been explored. I mean, I think Europe's been brought up, Canada's been brought up. A lot of like. I think the kinds of things that we generally look for in a DEF CON location, right, are one is. Obviously, just ability to hold like more than 10,000 people, affordability, visa accessibility. So Thailand was like actually excellent in that regard. Then presence of a strong existing community, and I mean Europe has a great existing community. Warsaw has a great community. So no, I mean I think you guys should you know, like fill in the form and make your case.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you again so much for coming. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And I see a lot of things happening that are going to put Poland's more centerfold in how Ethereum is shaping up. I love the fact that Tomek is joining as the director at Ethereum, and I love the kind of support that we're getting from him. And it's awesome that you're finally here. I'm really happy about that. Thank you so much.
Thank
Loud
you.
applause. Pizza's back there. Sushi is gonna be back there. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming.